do some more research. But I wanted to raise a question. I think this morning in the Albuquerque Journal or over the weekend, we saw a story about, as we're going into the budget year, certainly we already know we need more police officers on our streets, and we're all working to make that happen, and more 911 operators to get to those calls more quickly and to meet our goals. But one thing that I've consistently, this council's consistently heard from you and your command staff is that for priority one calls, when someone calls 911 that's being shot, that's being stabbed, or someone in their home, we're getting to those calls on time. I ran across two reports of two incidents that happened in my district here just in the past couple of months. And as you know, you and I spoke earlier, I think the reason I found these is only because these are neighbors of mine that happened near my residence. In one incident in January of 2016 on Sims Avenue, a homeowner came home to find an unknown male person in his daughter's closet in the middle of the afternoon. When he reported to me and some other folks that he waited more than 45 minutes for contact with a police officer, that doesn't seem to meet with we get to the public's expectation when we say we're getting there when you call us. He raised this concern because he was concerned that didn't happen. You said you might be aware of this case. Can you give us some update on this case?
Yes, sir, Council President and Councilor Davis. I actually have the CAD in front of me. The call was created at 1709. That's 509. Our first officers were on the scene at 1729. They were there in about 20 minutes. Given the time of day, from the time it was dispatched until the officer arrived, he was there in 7 minutes.
And so, Chief, thank you for that. That's actually much more helpful. I appreciate that, Mr. President. If we're telling people in the paper that we're getting to priority one calls in 10 minutes, this one is a man in a teenage girl's closet in the middle of 3 o'clock in the middle of the hour, 5 o'clock in the middle of the afternoon. That's concerning, and I understand that things happen. But is there, and I realize that you just looked at this for us, but is there sometime between 509 and 522 in those 14, 15 minutes that this call was pending? I was around that day. That's just my block, actually. I don't recall us having any other serious incidents that would have delayed us 15 minutes from just dispatching a call of a grown man in a teenage woman's closet. Do we have enough officers to respond to these cases in the middle of the day?
Mr. President and Councilor Davis, all of our officers are appropriated to each one of the area commands based on the total calls for service and what the percentage is. Then each one of the area commands get that percentage of officers. We did the same thing with assignment by shift. I think one of the issues that we're trying to resolve right now is the amount of time between the time the first call is picked up and reducing that amount of time. And part of what we're doing right now is we've hired, right now we have 14 new employees in the 911 training center. They were just brought on. Training takes about 5 months. 4 of those employees will be completing their training this month, and they'll be assigned to shifts with a higher call volume. The remaining 10 were hired on March the 19th, and again, they'll go through the training process and placed properly. So we're looking at not only from the time we pick up the call, we're looking at all the dynamics in that call. Our busy hours, and I think everybody is aware of it, is rush hour, whether it's rush hour morning or rush hour afternoon. And sometimes those officers might be tied up on another priority one call and not able to go. But in this case, from the time the officer was dispatched till the time he was on the scene was just at 7 minutes.
And briefly, Mr. President, I appreciate the time. But in that 14 minutes, are you saying that your concern is that we just don't have enough people to hit the button and to dispatch the call? Or I hear that the officer was there in 10 minutes, which is sort of the number we've been presenting, but I'm worried about the 14-minute delay between when the call came in and when a dispatcher hit the radio button and got somebody there or sent it out with a CAD.
Yes, Councilor President and Councilor Davis, as I stated, part of the issue when I looked at this particular call was from the time the phone was picked up until it was dispatched was about 3 minutes and 30 seconds.
And Chief, I want to bring one other, I shared one other incident with you that I think is demonstrable of the same concern several months later. And again, I want to commend Commander Dorrego for his help in this case. On March 15th on Valverde, southeast near Valverde and Zuni, I received a phone call on my a neighbor of a victim who at 3:45 in the afternoon came home and found another strange man in her home. Her children were right behind her on the way home from Highland High School at the time. She ran outside and screaming, and found that this man was in her house. I got a call 32 minutes after the first call was placed. When I drove around the corner and met with her, I called 242 cops and was told that there were not enough officers available to respond to all the calls, and that she was told to go outside. Her concern, of course, was that his truck was outside in the driveway and he was calling to someone else around somewhere. She didn't know where he was. That one again, I finally was able to reach Commander Grego, and I appreciate his due diligence on this and his recognizing the immediate need for that and her concern, and dispatching an officer, I believe, in the station to respond for that. But that's twice, and just folks that I know in a couple of days. I think I want to express the concern that I think the newspaper outlined a real concern about our response times and our resources, and I know this council is going to take a serious look through the budget process and getting the 911 operators we need, in addition to the police officers we need. But I'm really concerned about it in the short term. I want to be sure we have the processes in place so that supervisors are aware of what calls are pending. When someone is calling and saying there's someone in my home with me and I can't go outside because his cohort is outside or I'm concerned he is, and they're there by themselves for 45 minutes, that's a concern that we couldn't articulate another party one call at the time that would have taken officers away. So I'm concerned about the mitigation efforts we have in place right now to be sure that the real priority one calls are being answered. I hope you can help us figure that out a little bit. I'm willing to work with you and advocate for whatever we need to make happen while we're still recruiting those other pieces. I want to be sure we have those systems in place. So,
Councilor Davis, I'll get an answer to you on that other one tomorrow morning.
Mr. President, I can do one more. But Chief, while you're here, I appreciate it. I wanted to follow up briefly on the settlements as well. We had a recent settlement that was announced last week for the Blue and Blue shooting, detective grant for $6.5 million. I actually was doing some research about another issue and came across a story that ran in the USA Today last year. And you might remember when it said the title in the USA Today was before Ferguson, there was Albuquerque. You gave a quote there that said, "I believe there are people in the force who shouldn't be there." And the follow-up was that the chief said the city simply may be unable to remove problem officers. I realized that was sort of early in this process. But since then, we've had a $5 million settlement in the Boyd shooting, $6.5 million in the detective grant shooting, now $240,000 or so last week for the UNM student who lost a testicle in those cases. My question sort of is, in the case of the UNM student, for instance, when you reviewed the lapel, did you review the lapel camera in your administrative review of that case? Did you
Council President and Councilor Davis, yes, I did.
And I mean, after watching that video, Chief, did you determine that force was appropriate in that particular case with
Council President Lewis and Councilor Davis, I made a determination that the officer made several mistakes in that incident. Since that incident is still in review and still a matter of a criminal case, I have a potential to be called as a witness in that case, so I think I need to be fair to the process.
I appreciate that, but again, speaking of that, in reviewing the shooting of Mr. James Boyd in the foothills, did you review the videotape before you declared that shooting justified at the press conference, the first press conference around that?
Council President Lewis and Councilor Davis, I did not review the entire videos, no, sir.
This is my, Chief, I'm not trying to embarrass anybody, I'm trying to make a point. I think that I'm concerned that we have a process in place to make the department better and to improve our systems of accountability. And I understand the frustration that we do have we at some point have had officers on the department that should not be there. What I'm concerned about is that as a new chief now taking over and from inheriting a system that you didn't create, that at least two high-profile places where your internal affairs process came to you for you to make a decision about appropriateness, it seems that you in that process failed to identify actions that prosecutors and judges now in two different cases have identified as potentially criminal. and instead, in the first case, recommended a suspension, but not a recommendation to the academy, and no criminal prosecution in the Boyd case, will justify without any type of criminal activity, without any type of recognizing potential criminal activity that a judge has done. I'm concerned that our process is not, I'm concerned that despite this council's efforts to resource better civilian police oversight, that rebuilds trust from the community, that the team that's looking at the system and using it to decide what's working and what's not in our department, the team is not seeing the problems that are leading to these settlements. And I get to my point of that's why I'm concerned. That's about 11 and some change $1 million settlements in the past year that we've been able to see for police misconduct. Based on the city's revenue forecast and revenue for the past year, we're taking in about $9 million a week in recurring funding. Every person in the city of Albuquerque, every time they look at a receipt, can take a whole week's worth of spending just to pay for police settlements that we seem to not be able to identify as problematic. That's concerning to me, that even though we have new leadership in the department, it's not picking up on those big red flags. And I'm concerned that those settlements will continue, and quite frankly, we need that money to put back into the recruiting for the 911 officers and for the police officers and the equipment that we need. And so I'm hoping that the council will, and thank you for indulging me in this, it's been a little while since I talked about police stuff. But I hope this council will indulge us in taking a serious look at whether we have the right process in place, and through the budget process, whether we have the right systems in place. And Chief, if you want to respond, I'm frustrated to see that we're not picking up on stuff that's leading to settlements that perhaps could have been prevented had we just been honest and said, I see a problem here for the weekend. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We'll go Councillor Gibson, and then Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, Chief, just a couple of things. You were talking just a few moments ago about the 911 operators, and that really concerns me too, because I've been getting reports from a couple of different sources that, and shared them with you, that we do not have enough 911 operators, and without clearing calls, making notes on calls and dispatching, everything else is sort of academic. So this is such an important part of providing good public safety service to the public. Just thought I'd bring it up again. And you did tell me, and please correct me if I'm not getting this correct, because I don't have the email in front of me, that you had a fairly full training class for 911 operators, but you were not able to really offer any of them employment after that. Is that it? No. Okay, tell me, I'm not remembering it correctly.
Council President Lewis and Councilor Gibson, what happened was when we did the advertisement for the positions, we have to go through a complete hiring process. There were a total of 14 employees that made it through that process. Now those 14 are in training. Training for a 911 dispatcher call taker is about 5 months in length. So for those people we hired early on are going to be available to, they'll be completing their training sometime around the end of this month. They'll be assigned to the shifts with a higher call volume. Of that, then we still have 10 that are in training. Those were 10 that were hired in March. So we are in the process of hiring, and part of that process includes not only the completion of their background investigation, but other factors as well as interviews, but then making sure that they make it through the training. So we have, just to recap, we have a total of 14 employees right now in 911 training.
Good, good. And how many do we have, do you recall, who are fully trained and they're working every day?
I can find out real fast.
Okay.
How about now?
Erica Wilson. She's in charge of our dispatch center.
Good afternoon, or good evening, I should say, everybody. Right now, I have a total of 64 911 operators, which includes, and then you add on another 9 for a total of 73 911 operators, and we have 37 dispatchers. I currently have 9 vacancies, which we're going to be opening this month to try and fill a June to July academy, because we can only pack so many people in at once.
Okay, so the 9 are, you said 9 vacancies were for the dispatchers?
It's for a combination of both. We hire and try to promote internally from people from 911 to dispatch. Gives us an opportunity to vet those candidates. The class that we started March 19th originally had a total of 14 candidates in it, but by the day we started, we were at 10. We lost 1 to another city job, 2 others who felt it wasn't the right fit for them, and another who's waiting until this next class because she's completing her master's degree and knew classroom academy training would interfere with her master's program.
Okay, so, but right now there's a total of 9 vacancies altogether.
Altogether.
Okay, all right, thank you so much. One last thing, if I may, President. Chief, I wonder if you could give us an update on the development of policies and writing policies necessary for the settlement agreement, as well as the accompanying procedures.
Council President Lewis and Councilor Gibson. We have 15 that are right now in the commentary stage. We have 4 that are with the monitor for final approval. We anticipate hearing from the monitor by those on Wednesday. And then 2 that are also at the monitor's office right now. And those aren't due until another, I believe it's another week.
Okay, so that's 19 plus 2, 21. All right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, Councilor Jones and Councilor Payne.
Thank you, Mr. President. Chief, when Councilor Davis's questions raised some questions in my mind. Having read the newspaper a few times, I can't help but think there have been an extraordinary number of disciplinary actions, perhaps dismissals, firings, that have been recently reversed by both court order, by appeals, and also by the personnel board. Can you tell me how many officers that has perhaps affected? And if you think that what kind of effect does that have on you as the head of the department in how you discipline and or fire people who maybe shouldn't be around you?
Council President Lewis and Councilor Jones. I believe the one that's made the most publicity is Jeremy Deere. That case was tried for several days. The hearing officer made his recommendations. It was forwarded to the city personnel board, and it was reversed. And he was given a light suspension, and we were told to bring him back to work. We're currently appealing that decision, and that appeal is in the courts. That is the one I can speak to specifically. I believe the city attorney may have some additional information from some hearings that have happened recently where the higher courts have upheld the termination.
Thank you, Chief. Ms. Hernandez, do you want to respond to that in any way?
Mr. President and Councilor Jones, the Jeremy Deere case has certainly been the highest profile case. Another way that it has had an impact is that there have been some cases that, rather than allowing it to continue to the personnel board, the city has instead reached a settlement with that person that if they agree to never seek reemployment with the city, that we will settle their grievance, so that they are allowed to walk away, agree never to come back, and the appeal is dismissed on that basis. So there have been some cases that we deliberately decided not to move forward to the personnel board because we don't know what they would do. And so in that situation, we've chosen to settle some of those cases with that agreement that they don't return to the city, because that's the primary goal, is to, if the chief has decided that someone should no longer be a police officer, we want to make sure that that person is not returning and not rolling dice on that.
Anyone follow up on that?
Council President, may I interrupt?
Go ahead.
Yes, please.
There's people that are behind me that are continuing to make comments that make it almost impossible for me to hear you because I wear hearing aids. They pick up most of the noise behind me. So if you could please ask the audience.
No, I appreciate that, and I could not hear it, you know, so, but we'll ask those that are in the audience, anybody just to please hold all the comments, and if it does get disruptive, I'll give you a warning, and we will ask you to be removed from the chambers, or remove yourselves from the chambers, so apologize about that, Chief. I wasn't hearing it, but we'll pay attention to that. Councilor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I guess my next question is, Chief, does this have an effect on these actions in courts and personnel board and all that? Does this have an effect on how you discipline officers?
Councilor President Lewis and Councilor Jones, it does, and let me explain to you why it does, is that we take a really hard look at each and every case. And it's our job, and it's finally my job to make a final recommendation. And those final recommendations go through a Laudermill hearing process. And during that process, I hear evidence both from the representatives from the APOA as well as having the files in front of me. And sometimes I may deviate either up or down based on the severity of the incident about which discipline will be administered. I think the thing that always has bothered me, even before I got here, was the number of cases that are reversed either by the city personnel board or by the state district court on when people have been terminated by the department. I personally have only seen the one, but I believe that there have been many more since I've been the chief that were discipline was recommended to be fired, and those were overturned.
Thank you. And just one more, Mr. President, and I will stop this. And when those decisions are overturned or lost, do you put those officers back on the street, or do you assign a sworn officer to a desk job because of what you consider an issue with them being on the street?
Council President Lewis and Councilor Jones, I think we'd have to look at the totality of the circumstances and what those charges were. I think any time you bring back an officer or any employee who's been terminated from employment, it becomes almost impossible to take any future action against them in any future disciplinary actions. I think that's what has an impact the most on the department. I have not had to do that yet, but I will tell you I do not look forward to that if these cases continue to be overturned or reversed by either the city personnel board or by state district court.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you, Mr. President.
All right, thanks, Chief. I believe that's all the Q&A for the administration, so we'll go on to item 6, the journal. Council Vice President Pena.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move approval of the March 21st journal.
So a motion, a second for approval of the journal. Any questions? Those in favor say yes. Those opposed, no. Motion passes. Item 7, communications introduction. Councilors, any changes to the letter of introduction? Councilor Vice President Pena.
I move approval of the letter of introduction. Second.
Okay, so, motion is second for approval of the letter of introduction. Those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Those opposed, no. That motion passes. Item 8 is reports of committee. There are none. We'll go to deferrals and withdrawals. Councilors, any deferrals or withdrawals at this time?